Hi, I'm Josh McGrath,
I'm Andrew Haas.
and this is the Art in Pursuit podcast. In our last episode, we explored two big picture ideas that contribute to modern singleness among men. Today, in part two, we're looking at the personal reasons men are remaining single, diving into the fears, cultural forces, and emotional fatigue that are shaping men's decisions to opt out of dating and relationships altogether. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the show. You can watch the video on YouTube or listen with Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share it with friends, because changing the dating culture starts with changing the conversation. So, Andrew, let's dive in here to part two of why men are remaining single.
Yes, today we are going to look at 4 categories that unpack some of the reasons that men often choose not to pursue a relationship. To start, we're going to look at broken examples. Men often have, let's be honest, bad examples around them. Could be parents who are divorced. It could be their friends are getting divorced. It could be just not having good role models. There's just so much brokenness and dysfunction around us that can often make it really hard for a guy to move forward.
And even if their parents didn't get divorced, unfortunately, so many families today, so many marriages today are just very broken and dysfunctional. For any men who grew up, in the 80s or 90s, 40 to 42% of all marriages ended in divorce. And so there's a large number of men today who are the byproduct of a divorced, mother and father. And that is going to impact, in some way, shape, or form, how they view marriage and how they view, what they want to pursue when it comes to romantic interests.
And we see this in the business world. If you want to do well at country music, you'll have a higher chance of success in Nashville. Same thing with movies, right? If you want to produce a movie well, there's a good chance that'll happen in Hollywood. So you surround yourself by other people who are doing something well. And when it comes to relationships, unfortunately, too often men they just don't surround themselves or are unable to surround themselves by good examples.
That's really true, because we see a decrease in marriages, which means there's a decrease in men pursuing women towards marriage, which means there's a decrease in men being in relationships. And so it actually becomes harder and harder as a guy, as the years go on, to find healthy, functional examples of other men pursuing romantic interests, pursuing marriage, getting married, and doing it well, doing it in a healthy manner.
Now, it certainly doesn't reduce a guy's responsibility to do it well.
Of course.
But it certainly factors in to when a guy thinks about a relationship, when he thinks about doing it well, what does success look like? We often look around, okay, who else is doing it well? Who else has succeeded? And if there's not someone that you can look to, that can make it much harder for a guy.
So the second category that we're going to examine is this idea of modern culture and social influences. When we look at the institution of marriage, we've seen a pretty stark decline over the last 60 plus years. Historically, that was kind of the trajectory every human being was on, unless you became a eunuch in the king's court. Like, that was a trajectory all of humanity was on. And then we enter, the Industrial Revolution in the modern age, and suddenly marriage becomes an option, an add-on, a choice, not something that is just inevitable. And as a result, the modern world has allowed men and women to decide, I don't need marriage, either for financial reasons, social reasons, survival reasons. We've kind of discussed this before. And so now, because men and women are, financially independent, socially independent, and are kind of on the, live my own life, you do you. We've seen a decline in marriages across the modern Western world.
And there are a lot of negative social narratives out there, for better or for worse. It often makes good entertainment. We see it in music, we see it in movies, and it can be entertaining, but at the end of the day, it's really not setting us up for success when that becomes what we familiarize ourselves with. When that becomes the norm, or when that becomes something we're repeatedly exposed to, it's funny, or it's engaging, or it's interesting, but it's not actually helping us get to a place where we can see it as successful.
Yes, and one of the other things that influences men are the endless videos that are posted online of other men, not planning a date right, or not acting, quote, the right way, or not saying, quote, the right thing. There are so many videos of women, judging, attacking, excoriating men because they're not good at, pursuing women romantically. And so men very much internalize that negativity and think, I don't want to be the next video out there. I don't want to be the guy that she's talking about to her followers, how, I didn't pick the right restaurant. I didn't pull up in the right kind of car. I didn't, talk about the right type of topics at dinner. I wasn't the right type of boyfriend. No guy wants that. And so unfortunately, a lot of these, social media videos, these viral moments have caused men to just think, yeah, it's not worth pursuing a woman because the risk is I might end up online as the guy that didn't do it right.
And social isolation is a big factor here as well, where, the advent of social media is kind of this paradox.
Yeah.
As we become more engaged in one arena, we are becoming much less engaged in another. And, we won't get into all the studies of showing all the problems with that. But men need to recognize that as they're able to engage in certain spheres more online and with social media, it's going to make it harder for them naturally to engage in other arenas. And men need to really push back on that. It's not one or the other. Yeah. It can be both, but men need to just recognize this could be a big negative influence.
And one of the things that can actually lead to social isolation is your geographic location. If you live in a more rural area, it's harder sometimes to see people, to engage with them. Your opportunities are more limited. Now, obviously, you can be in a city and very much be isolated, stay indoors in your apartment all day, every day, not go out, not see people. So it's not like if you live in a rural area, you're not social at all. No, you can be, but your options are a bit more limited. The people with whom you can engage and the women that you can pursue, we've discussed this before, the options are limited. And so another reason why a man may be single is because he's in a more rural area, and the type of women, the number of women, who the women are, he's just like, I'm not attracted to any of them, or we have nothing in common. And so people are asking, why isn't he pursuing these women? And it's like, well, limited number of options for him.
And let's not forget hookup culture and the negative consequences there. Men are too often ready and willing to engage in that quick fix, something short-term, fun, immediate, with a complete disregard for what it might imply further down the road. And the third category we want to look at is dating game dynamics. Too often, this whole thing becomes gamified, if you will.
Sure.
And, both men and women like to play games, for better or for worse. But specifically for men, they need to be aware of the game that can be played and the tendency to engage in that capacity. It's not really a game, but there can be elements of it where men decide, hey, if I want to be successful at this, I need to engage in a way where it turns into more of a back and forth.
It's true, because the reality of getting to know someone, it's not a game. It's like social etiquette. It's building a friendship. It's getting to know one another, and it is a back and forth. and there's certain social norms that are accepted and that you practice. But where the problem becomes is when one party, and unfortunately, it's oftentimes women, not exclusively, but oftentimes women, where in today's dating culture, when a man shows interest, she'll play this game of, well, I'm sort of interested, but I'm not interested. And then now I'm interested, but I'm not interested. And it's this weird back and forth, this pull of your affection, of your time, of your energy, of your resources, without actually being clear and communicating, yes, I like you, let's date with purpose. And so men are frustrated by this, no, take me on a date, show me time and energy and interest, but I can't reciprocate that to you. And then the guy begins to pull away, and now she's showing interest, but I really enjoyed our time together. That's the game that men don't like. And by and large today, it's kind of flip-flopped where, originally men were just interested in one thing. They wanted sex, and that was about it. They'd do anything to get that. And today, what we're actually seeing is while there's still that drive, men actually are looking for real relationship. They're looking for something more long-term. They're looking for something with meaning and purpose. And unfortunately, many women, whether they are or not, what they're communicating is they want to play this drama, emotional game, and men are like, no, I'm out. And so what we're finding is a lot of men just disengaging from pursuing women altogether because they're like, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, I don't have the bandwidth to play some game of trying to figure out, do you like me, do you not like me, where's this going, where's it not going?
Right.
And the very nature of everything we talk about on this podcast is to cut through the mess of the dating culture so that men can provide clarity, so that there's purpose, so that there's direction, so everyone's on the same page from the get-go.
Too often in dating culture, the narrative is for the guy, hey, if you just do A, B, C, and D in that order, in the right amount, then she'll respond the right way. And it's like, that's the bad cycle that men can get into, thinking if I just orient myself a certain way, if I say the right thing, or it becomes a response to what she's saying. Oh, she said this, now I've got to say this. And if I say this, she'll say this. And it becomes this mental game almost of what do I say, when do I say it, where I'm looking for a specific outcome. When in reality, guys should just be thinking, what can I do that's respectful? What can I do that leaves her better off? How can I be transparent, honest, right? All these things that we advocate for. If men, kind of set aside the games and just approach it as, this is who I am, and this is what I would like, and then, you go from there.
And one of the things that happens often is this idea of mismatched expectations. Single men in America are becoming, as a whole, much more conservative year after year. And so the vision that they have for their life, the values that they have, tend to be much more traditional, much more conservative. But single women, as a whole, are becoming more and more liberal. And so the values that they hold, the vision for their life, is much more liberal, independent, moving away from a lot of the social institutions like family, marriage, and faith. And so there's oftentimes mismatched expectations where men are looking to pursue a relationship with the expectation that it's going to follow a more traditional route towards a more traditional end. And the woman is thinking, hey, I don't need no man. I'm not interested in being someone's arm candy or someone's girlfriend. I'm not interested in being someone's wife. I'm not interested in being a mother. I'm interested in this moment, in the fun and the satisfaction, the happiness that I get out of it. And so unfortunately, with those mismatched expectations, men are actually saying, you know what? I don't know which woman out there shares the same values and vision that I would have, so I'm just going to stay away from all women. Obviously, that's not the correct response. Obviously, there are women out there who share conservative values and vision. And we've talked about how you can find them in your life. The episode titled Wife Hunting, great episode, go listen to that, gentlemen. But mismatched expectations will oftentimes leave men just feeling like, it's not worth starting that conversation.
And I would challenge men to be ready and willing to engage with that brokenness and dysfunction. You know, so often women are on the receiving end of the brokenness and dysfunction in relationships and in marriage. You know, in a divorce, there could be single parenting. In relationships, in relationships that don't end well, women more often than not bear the negative effects of that.
Yeah.
And so women can often just feel like, you know, I'm out. I don't need any of it. Guys aren't worth it. And part of what's going to help, you know, right the ship is men recognizing, wow, okay, we've been part of the problem, a big part of the problem for a long time. Our selfish drives are often result in women being hurt. And so what can I do? Even if she doesn't respond well, I need to play a part in bringing about a better future.
Yeah. So our fourth and final category is internal struggles that men have. And this would include things like, you know, burnout from past experiences. It's really easy when you place your hope in an opportunity in a relationship, when you have a vision for a long-term relationship or a vision for marriage. When you love somebody, you become vulnerable to them, with them, and they walk away from you. They break up with you. They don't want anything to do with you. That can leave you feeling very much like, okay, I can't go through this again.
Yeah.
And one of the sad realities of our current dating culture is that, you know, by and large, people just say, well, date whoever, you know, it's like trying on different hats. And so people are constantly dating each other, constantly getting to know each other, opening up, becoming vulnerable, and then breaking up with each other. And it's a terrible, awful cycle. And it's like a wound that never fully gets to heal, because every time it's almost healed, you repeat the cycle and it tears open again. And so one of the things that men have to recognize in their own life is that while they may have had some negative experiences in relationships, that can't be the determining factor for whether or not they're going to pursue future relationships. If you have a vision for marriage, if you have a desire for family, you know, listen to the last 50 some odd episodes and put that into practice in your life, because that's the only way you're going to navigate, not avoiding hurt, not avoiding rejection, but that's the only way you're going to be able to navigate heading towards marriage, heading towards covenant.
And men need to recognize that there could be a very real fear of responsibility.
Oh, for sure.
And we need to be ready and willing to take on responsibility in most areas of life. Specifically in relationships, it is important that men recognize that it is up to us to bear the burden of doing that well. We have to model that. We need to lead with that. But too often, men in our natural state, we try to reduce what we are responsible for. We try to take on as little as possible, often to get through whatever it is. Could be in work, could be in social life, in relationships. We just like to downplay the work that we need to put forward.
You're absolutely right, because if a man wants to pursue a woman, if he wants to be married, if he wants to have a family, that is a lot of responsibility that he now needs to take on, that he has to shoulder. And for many men, they like the status quo. They like the ease of their life. And, you know, as a single guy, my life is very, you know, unpredictably predictable. But like, I know how to relate in situations. I know what my life looks like. I know what my budget looks like. I know how my holidays look. You know, everything's kind of mapped out and pretty set in stone. And if I were to bring a woman into that world, well, that's going to look very different. That's going to require work. It's going to be inconvenient. I'm going to have a responsibility to her that I don't have right now. And then if I enter a covenant, and then if we begin a family, I mean, you're a father of 7, you know, there's responsibility when you start bringing kids into the world. And for many men, it's like, man, I just love my life as is. I love where I live. I love my schedule. I love my job. I love my freedom. But guess what? Men are called to be men of responsibility. And so if men want to be in relationships, they need to recognize that relationship equals responsibility.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. You know, a big hurdle that too many men either can't clear or won't clear is this idea of selfishness or inability to be inconvenienced.
Yeah.
Too many men have their routines, have their life, are unwilling to be inconvenienced. They might even recognize, wow, if I bring a woman into my life, if I have a relationship, a lot has got to change. And unfortunately, too many men actually are not up for that change.
It's true. And sadly, so many men don't understand the purpose of relationships, of romantic relationships, because they're supposed to lead to a destination, you know, either covenant or not covenant. And because they don't understand the value or purpose of marriage, they often will view relationships as you know, more lopsided towards the fun experience. How does it make me feel? What can I get out of it side of the spectrum, rather than the long-term covenant, investing in others, living selflessly, giving of myself to the other person's side. And so men, if they don't understand the purpose of a relationship, will then oftentimes just avoid relationships altogether because they don't understand what is the value in it other than having somebody in your life.
Yeah, if men don't understand the purpose of something, it's much harder to justify or reconcile the work needed to do that thing well. And relationships are no different. Too often, men don't recognize and understand the reason for something.
And a final thought here is this idea of emotional fatigue that men have. You know, I know that culture will say men aren't in touch with their emotions, and you know, men have shallow emotions, and men are stoic, and all these different things. As a guy, as a man, I'm very aware that while some of those traits may be prevalent in my life, I am affected emotionally by things. And particularly if there's a lot of negativity in culture towards men, negativity in culture towards relationships or traditional gender roles or marriage, if there's negativity from, you know, friends or family with regards to, you know, being single or pursuing a relationship, like, you feel that. And so as men are engaging and walking through life, it's easy for them to become just emotionally fatigued with it all, and to just kind of be like, you know, I can't do any of this. And sadly, many of them will withdraw into social isolation. They'll put their time and energy into things they can control. We've talked about this before, things like video games, right? Self-improvement, working out, becoming a gym bro, where it's life suddenly is about them and what they can control, so that hopefully external things don't affect them.
Now, I'd like to talk about this concept of the pursuit of happiness. Culture likes to promote happiness as perhaps the ultimate goal. And oftentimes, relationships are seen as a way to get that happiness.
Sure.
Meaning, we will look at somebody else, a potential partner, as someone to bring us happiness. It's like this, I need to get something in order to be more happy.
Yes, you know, we see it all the time in Hollywood, you know, in movies and TV shows, where you've got these men, you know, again, I'm watching Big Bang Theory, so you've got like these 4 men, and the show starts out with all of them single, and all they want to do is to be in a relationship. I mean, really not Sheldon, he kind of stumbles into it. But the other 3 really want to be in a relationship. And when they're not in a relationship, they're always talking about how their life is just so miserable, they're so unhappy, they're so lonely, what's the purpose of living? And again, it's a comedy, But what it highlights is an underlying theme that exists probably everywhere, where if you're not in a relationship, somehow you're not a complete person, you're not a full person, you're a half a cookie, you're not fully happy. You haven't found your purpose yet. You haven't found your person yet. Now, as a single man, I categorically reject that premise and that thought process because it is antithetical to what the gospel says we are. We are fully complete in Christ, but culturally, it's so easy to adopt this idea that, man, if only I was in a relationship, look at all the other happy people. If only I was married, look at all the other people who are married. And there can be this pressure as you come of age, in your late 20s, 30s, into your 40s, where if you're still single, you can feel like you're missing out on like important milestones that everyone else is walking through. The milestone of, well, I should be married by now. Well, I should be having a kid by now. Well, I should have had my second kid by now. Well, my kid should be, going to the private school by now. Well, I should be doing this. And you can begin to feel like you're missing out because you're not doing those things. And so men have to recognize that they're not complete by being in a relationship. They're not going to find happiness by being in a relationship. They're not going to find purpose by being in a relationship. Now, those things can exist. Absolutely, relationships provide purpose. Absolutely, relationships can provide happiness. Absolutely, you can feel a sense of accomplishment and being known by being in a relationship. But you don't need a relationship to be able to walk a purposeful life, to feel valued, to have direction.
And too often in our pursuit of happiness, we provide an opportunity for selfishness and self-centeredness to grow and flourish. And too often that involves removing conflict, removing difficulty, removing friction, removing challenges. We think that for me to be happier, even if that was the goal, I need to remove the difficult things in life, and then I'll have a better path forward. Then my life will be better. When in reality, it's often the challenges and the difficulties that make us better, that actually provide a sense of this is worthwhile, this is good. And more men need to realize that they actually can take on difficulty and take on nuance and challenge, and it actually would be good for them.
That's an excellent point that I just want to reiterate. This idea that happiness is found by removing tension in our life. And it isn't. Happiness is not dependent upon the tension that exists. And guess what? Life is full of tension. If you're defining happiness by having no tension in your life, you'll never be happy. You'll always be a miserable person, which actually is kind of like half our culture right now. People are miserable because there's tensions in their life. And our happiness isn't dependent upon external things. Right now, our culture says that. You'll be happier if you have more money, if you have health care, if you have, whatever, a girlfriend or boyfriend, if you have the nice car, if you live in the warm climate, if you live in the nice house, if you have, the lower taxes, whatever. But no, those are all just external things that don't determine your happiness at all. According to the University of Utah Health, they say this, quote, "We have it backwards. True happiness isn't based on what others can provide us. It actually stems from helping others," end quote. And this is very much a biblical concept. It is better to give than to receive. And so men, the way they're going to find happiness is not by what they can get from others or the world around them, but by what they can give to others, what they can give to the world.
And so often in our giving, in our desire to help, it's often in situations where you might volunteer for a bit, you might do something for a day, you might go somewhere for a week, all good, but imagine actually living life day in and day out with somebody. That's an opportunity. That's a place where men have an opportunity to help, among other things, somebody day in and day out. And that can be a very challenging idea where I can't just check out and leave. I can't just do something for a few hours and then I've done my duty and I leave. So if we can orient ourselves toward this idea, if men can start to see, oh, wow, I'm going to be better off if I serve, I'm going to be better off if I'm helping, one place that can actually produce a lot of good fruit is in a healthy relationship.
For sure. And this idea of, pursuing happiness, that's very much a secular cultural idea. That's not a biblical idea. The Bible doesn't talk about, as believers being happy.
Exactly.
In fact, Jesus is like, in this world, you will have trials. Take up your cross and follow me. Die to self. The gospel isn't one of you being happy. But the Bible does talk about joy. And the funny thing is, when the Bible talks about joy, it's often juxtaposed against suffering. Count it all joy, brethren, when, you face various trials and tribulations. We're to count it joy when we suffer for Christ. And so for the Christian, your goal should not be pursuing happiness. Absolutely not. We're utilizing a term that is common vernacular in today's culture to really unpack an idea that ultimately you can't pursue relationships to be happy. And we see that as believers, part of joy comes from a heart of thankfulness. Paul writes, I give thanks in all things. He's not giving thanks for all things because there's a lot of crappy things out there, but he's giving thanks in all things because our thankfulness, our heart of gratitude, our joy isn't dependent upon external situations. It's for the believer, it's about understanding relationship with Christ, who he is, what he has done for us. And in that, we are to serve as Christ served us. And when you recognize that role, then as a believer, as a man, you're like, oh, life is very different. Relationships are very different. Marriage is very different.
Yeah, we have it backwards. We say to be more happy, I need to find someone to be in the right relationship with. Where in reality, if you put in the work to do a relationship well, happiness is often the result, as it should be. So men need to shift their thinking from what can I do to live a happier life? That's a poor way to orient yourself, versus I'm going to put in the hard work. I'm going to do the right thing over the long haul. It's not going to be easy, but one of the effects of that is my life will be better off. I'll likely be happier.
Yes. There's a great Chinese proverb I know that you introduced when we were prepping for today's episode that says, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help somebody.
And I really think that's onto something. It's pithy, but there's truth there. Men need to focus and orient themselves around how can my life, how can my efforts, how can my energy make other people better off? Broadly speaking, and in this case, specifically in a relationship. When they're thinking about being in a relationship with a woman, what is that going to look like to make her better off? Time magazine has a guide to happiness, for whatever that's worth, and it says, good deeds may do more than give you a temporary boost. People who routinely do them may actually be happier and have a higher quality of life.
Now they're capturing, again, something as believers we've known for 2,000 plus years, which is we are called to serve others. And in that we find joy, we find fulfillment, we find contentment. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. It is hard. And I think about the fact that so often, you can get the short-term high of helping somebody, when their car's stuck in the snow, or helping an old lady carry her groceries, or, rescuing a child's cat from the tree. That's like a very quick, easy step in, serve, help, save, whatever. And you can get that boost of being like, oh, it feels great to serve. But most of life actually is serving people in difficult situations, in hard moments that are not seen, that maybe you don't even receive thanks for. But there is purpose in serving others. There's joy in serving others, particularly when we see them grow, when we see them, make healthy choices. I think about, again, you're a parent, you're serving your kids day in and day out, and your kids likely aren't thanking you every time you do something for them. But there's a joy when they accomplish something, when they do something well, when they do something healthily, when they're growing in maturity and understanding and responsibility. There's a joy in that comes from serving them. And in the same way, as men, who want to be in romantic relationships, who want to be married, guess what we're going to have to do? We're going to have to serve. And we're going to serve day in, day out, in unseen moments, in difficult moments, and hard moments, not because we're pursuing happiness, but because we're pursuing the call to serve others, and in that, we'll find greater happiness.
And this is obvious for most men in the work sphere. Think about guys who are ready and willing and desiring to engage in difficult work situations. Challenges come up in the workplace, and guys are usually very ready to work through those. Mm-hmm. And there's satisfaction and there's fulfillment through the difficulty. And obviously, there's a paycheck there on the other side of it. But how many men, even later in their life, work because they love it? Because, there's something about the difficulty, the challenge, that often is rewarding. Too often, though, in the relational side of things, the difficulty and the challenge we deem as somehow not worth it.
Yep.
But in my opinion, the fulfillment and the satisfaction and all of the blessings and benefits of being married far outweigh pretty much any paycheck.
I think that's a great place to conclude today's episode. So, gentlemen, if you've been feeling stuck, tired of dating, frustrated by culture, maybe even unsure if a healthy relationship is possible for you, you're not alone. But you don't have to stay where you are. Today's episode wasn't just a list of reasons why men are single. It's a wake-up call to ask a better question. What kind of man am I becoming? And becoming that kind of man requires action. So your homework this week, ask yourself 3 questions and process what the answer is. Number 1, am I not pursuing marriage because I'm afraid? Number 2, do I really believe relationships are good and worth the effort? And number 3, am I interested in pursuing a woman primarily for what she can offer or for what I can offer? As always, we love having you here on the Art and Pursuit podcast, and we look forward to having you here next time.